The slap hadn't happened yet, but the judgment in Kara Whitmore's eyes felt like a bruise forming in real time. It started with a glance. Not the rushed, distracted kind you give to another human in a busy place, but the deliberate downward sweep of someone taking stock of another person's worth. Kara's eyes had gone from Naomi Ellison's soft navy cashmere blazer to her pressed white blouse, her tailored slacks, her platinum boarding pass, and paused, just long enough. "May I see your boarding pass again, ma'am?" Kara asked, her voice tight behind a veneer of customer service training. Naomi offered it without a word. The square of high-gloss platinum, bordered in chrome and embossed with the winged emblem of Ellison Aerodyne, shimmered faintly under the cabin light. Kara took it between two fingers like she was holding a moth-eaten napkin. Naomi didn't flinch. She merely adjusted the titanium pin on her lapel, rotating it slightly until the engraved gear wing symbol aligned with the edge of her blazer. The cabin was still filling with the polite quiet of first-class boarding, faint jazz playing overhead, a few murmured greetings, the soft clink of champagne flutes. "This is seat 1A, Kara said, studying the pass too long. "Executive Premier Tier." Naomi said nothing. Kara didn't look up. "This seat is reserved for our most loyal flyers. High-volume corporate travel only." "I know," Naomi replied. Her voice was even, almost warm. "I selected it myself." That pause, half a second too long, rippled into something louder than any argument. Kara's eyes narrowed slightly. Behind Naomi, a tall man in a sharp gray suit, Elliot Garrison, she'd learn later, shifted in his seat in 2A and glanced up from his phone. In 3B, Melinda Zhu pretended to keep flipping through The Economist, but her eyes had stopped moving. A few rows behind, a cough. Kara handed the pass back, pressing it between Naomi's fingers, as if to emphasize that permission had been granted. "You understand," Kara said quietly, leaning just a bit closer. "We've had problems before. People sneaking into seats they didn't pay for." Naomi gave her a thin smile. "How unfortunate." Kara nodded once and stepped away. Naomi reclined slightly and opened the leather folder on her lap, reviewing her in-flight schedule. Meeting with the Department of Defense procurement team in Miami. Review of the new AI threat detection models. Board call with Skylink at 5:15 p.m. sharp. No mention of being interrogated for sitting in a seat she engineered. When she'd commissioned the interior of Ellison Aerodyne's flagship E-201 jets, Naomi had been precise. Every stitch of the deep indigo leather seat, every inch of the walnut grain along the tray table, every curve of the reinforced carbon shell had been signed off by her hand. She hadn't wanted gold or marble or flash. She wanted space, dignity, a place for someone who didn't have to prove they belonged. But even here, at 41,000 feet, the math didn't change. Skin, then voice, then credentials. That's how judgment was weighed. That's how rooms recalibrated when someone like her walked in. She thought back to a lecture at MIT, where a senior professor once told her, flatly in front of 24 students, "It's not about being excellent. It's about being undeniable." He didn't say, "because you're black," but he didn't have to. She'd carried that invisible curriculum into every boardroom since. A soft ding overhead. Final call for boarding. Naomi closed her folder and looked out the window as the tarmac buzzed with movement. Somewhere near the rear of the plane, the soft shuffle of carry-ons and murmured seat assignments filtered through the cabin walls. She wondered, idly, how many of the people boarding had ever had to explain themselves for occupying space they'd paid for. "Excuse me, ma'am?" Kara was back, her voice the same polite blade. Can I see a matching form of identification? And the credit card used to book this ticket? Naomi turned slowly this time. Kara didn't blink. Naomi reached into her briefcase, removed her ID, a North Carolina driver's license listing her address in Charlotte's historic 4th Ward, and then followed with a slim black metal card, her American Express Centurion. Kara took them both without thanks. Behind her, the silence deepened. Elliot Garrison was no longer pretending not to watch. His phone was angled ever so slightly toward the aisle. Melinda Zhu had stopped pretending to read altogether. "This card," Kara said, holding it up like a forged passport, "is usually reserved for people with extremely high annual spending, $250,000 or more." Naomi nodded once. "That's accurate." Kara's lip twitched. "You know," she said, voice dropping to a whisper, "we do get people trying to use borrowed cards. Think they can outsmart the system, but the computer always flags them eventually." Naomi did not reply. A pause. Then, "You people always find a way to sneak in." It was a whisper, but it landed like a hammer. The words weren't even original. Naomi had heard them before, once from a college roommate's parent, once from a recruiter at a Silicon Valley job fair. They were part of a lexicon older than the aircraft itself. You people. A shorthand for suspicion. A mirror reflecting someone else's fear onto her dignity. She let it pass. For now. "Is there anything else I can help you with, Miss Whitmore?" Naomi asked evenly. Kara hesitated, just for a second. "You may remain seated," she said finally, as if delivering a small favor. "For now." She walked away. Naomi sat perfectly still. A quiet weight settled across her chest, familiar and ancient. The pressure of knowing exactly what someone thought of you before they spoke it aloud. The silence in the room after it had been said, the second guessing that followed. Should I say something? Should I rise? She did not rise. The titanium pin on her lapel caught a glint of light and held it. Her company's logo. The company that owned the aircraft. The seat. The sky above them. She turned slightly and caught the reflection of her own face in the darkened window. Soft brown eyes, the faintest line at the edge of her lip. The face of someone who had lived this conversation in every version imaginable. Her mother once told her, "Dignity isn't silence, Naomi. It's choosing which battles to end, and which ones to end careers over." She took a slow breath and opened her folder again. Across the aisle, Jordan Reyes, a civil rights attorney from Los Angeles, lowered his tablet. His eyes had been on Naomi since the second exchange. He'd seen the microaggressions. He'd seen them escalate. He'd seen Kara's posture, the way her arms stiffened and her voice rose as Naomi remained calm. He'd seen it too many times. In airports, courtrooms, even law schools. He wanted to say something. He didn't. In 3B, Melinda Zhu opened Twitter and typed out a single sentence. "I think a flight attendant is racially profiling a black woman in first class. Not sure, but it's not sitting right with me." She hit send and closed her phone. Naomi reached into her case again, removed a thin, folded contract, and laid it gently on her tray table. It bore the watermark of Ellison Aerodyne and the header, EAD Division Purchase Order, number 4723B. It wasn't for Kara. Not yet. It was just there. Waiting. The seat reclined slightly. The lights dimmed. But the tension did not. Kara passed by again 20 minutes later, offering warm nuts and pre-meal drinks. She handed Naomi's glass a second too forcefully. "Cabernet," she said. "Try not to spill it." Naomi looked up at her, and for the first time since boarding, she smiled. "Thank you," she said. "That will be all." The smirk faltered, just slightly. Outside the window, clouds broke to reveal a golden sunset cresting over the Atlantic. The light filled the cabin with the soft glow of late-day hush. And Naomi Ellison, seated in 1A of the plane she built, simply turned the page. Let her keep talking, she thought. Some storms are best handled after they land. "You people always find a way to sneak in," Kara Whitmore said, just loud enough for Row 2 to hear, but soft enough to pretend it wasn't said at all. The words hung in the air like invisible smoke. No one responded. Not yet. The passengers in first class, seasoned professionals who knew when not to get involved, returned to their drinks, their magazines, their carefully cultivated bubbles of indifference. But the atmosphere had shifted. The temperature in the cabin, the rhythm of breath and conversation. It all changed. Naomi Ellison remained still in her seat, her hands gently folded over the open folder on her lap. She had learned long ago not to react in the first moment. First reactions could be dismissed as emotional, but measured silence, that left a mark. She stared straight ahead, not looking at Kara, not acknowledging the remark. Instead, she reached into her blazer and pulled out a small coin. Gold-plated, aged at the edges. She turned it over between her fingers, slowly. On one side, the face of her grandfather, an original member of the Tuskegee Airmen, minted posthumously in a commemorative issue. On the other, the words he used to whisper to her as a child. "You are what they fear, so let them fear you." The moment was building. Kara returned to the galley, muttering something to Derek Collins about making sure the ticket actually matched the ID. Derek looked uncomfortable, but didn't intervene. He'd seen Kara pull this before. Soft challenges that turned sharp, particularly when the passenger didn't look the part. But his job wasn't to get in the middle. His job was to keep service smooth. And as long as Naomi remained calm, he could pretend it hadn't happened. Naomi exhaled softly through her nose. She opened her tablet and reviewed her presentation notes, skimming figures she already knew by heart. $2.3 billion in annual contracts, 47 domestic partnerships, 24 patents filed in her name, a software suite installed in over 70% of commercial aircraft in North America. And yet, she was the one asked to prove she belonged. The plane leveled off at cruising altitude. Cabin lights dimmed to a soft glow. Warm towels were offered. In her row, Naomi declined politely. Across the aisle, Elliot Garrison leaned slightly into the aisle, phone angled discreetly. He wasn't filming yet, but he was ready. Melinda Shu was typing on her phone again, the speed of her thumbs increasing as she caught pieces of what had just happened. A private group chat with her PR firm colleagues, all of whom would have something to say about it. Jordan Reyes had stopped reading. He hadn't said a word, but his lawyer's brain was working like a machine. He had seen discrimination cases before, represented victims, argued before judges who looked like Kara Whitmore. The pattern was unmistakable. It started with a tone. Then came the questioning. Then came the accusation. Now, it was about to escalate. Kara reappeared, tray in hand, wine glasses clinking. "Cabernet?" she asked, holding the glass a few inches too high, poised to tip. She handed it to Naomi without eye contact, the motion stiff. Naomi accepted it, nodding with gentle civility. "Thank you." "No spills this time, I hope," Kara added in a falsely cheerful voice. This time, Naomi did look up. Her eyes met Kara's, calm and deliberate. "Your concern is noted." It wasn't a retort. It was a mirror, and Kara flinched without meaning to. "I'll be back shortly with dinner service," Kara said curtly, retreating down the aisle like she'd been pushed. In the space she left behind, silence pressed in again. Naomi glanced across the aisle. Elliot gave her the faintest nod of recognition. Melinda's fingers paused mid-text. Jordan met Naomi's eyes and held them for a beat longer than polite. She saw it in their expressions. They were watching. They had heard. They had registered that something ugly was unfolding. The wine tasted metallic. Naomi set the glass down. She picked up the commemorative coin again. Her thumb traced its edge. The plane hummed forward over the Atlantic, the same ocean her ancestors had crossed in chains. She smiled slightly at the irony. All this way, and still being asked to show her papers. Kara returned 40 minutes later for the dinner service. Her face was taut, her voice clipped. The plates were arranged perfectly. The service robotic. She hovered slightly too long near Naomi's seat, as if hoping for a reaction. "Is everything to your satisfaction?" she asked. "Yes," Naomi said. "Everything is being recorded quite clearly." Kara stiffened. "Excuse me?" Naomi didn't answer. She didn't have to. Kara moved on. A few rows back, Jordan Reyes turned his phone camera on, facing downward. It recorded ambient cabin noise, the faint buzz of air circulation, and after a few moments, the unmistakable words floating from Kara's direction. "These seats are for people who create things," Kara said to Derek, "not for people who just walk in expecting handouts." Naomi didn't look back. Jordan's eyes darkened. Melinda's phone buzzed. The tweet she'd posted earlier, casually phrased, just a passing thought, had been retweeted over 500 times. One reply read, "Film it. These people always escalate when no one watches." And they were right. Naomi leaned her head back, eyes half closed. Her mother's voice echoed faintly in her mind. "Pick your moment, baby. Let them get loud. You get smart." She waited. The dinner plates were cleared. Lights dimmed further. A soft jazz instrumental drifted from the cabin speakers. Billie Holiday's Solitude. Naomi closed her eyes, not to rest, but to listen. To the rhythm of the plane, to the waiting tension in the cabin. 20 minutes passed. Then the whisper came again. "Look at her, sitting there like she owns the place." The phrase was too loud to be incidental, too pointed to be passive. Naomi opened her eyes and calmly pressed the record button on her digital memo device. A new red light blinked softly beside her tray. Across the aisle, Elliot was no longer pretending to scroll. He was recording now. Clearly. Deliberately. Jordan leaned toward Naomi, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you want me to say something?" "No," Naomi replied. "Not yet." And Kara walked past again, loudly offering water to the white couple in 2B and 2C. When she passed Naomi, her tone dropped again. "People always think they can fake their way into first class, but the system works. It always finds them out." That was it. Naomi unlatched her briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It bore a line of blacked-out figures, a signature at the bottom, and the header. Ellison Aerodyne. Purchase Authority. Skylink Aircraft Program. Annual Volume Contract. She placed it gently on her tray table, face down. Waiting. The cabin lights shifted. The soft chime announced final meal service. Kara didn't return to Naomi's row. Instead, she stood at the galley, arms folded, glaring down the aisle as if daring someone to challenge her. Naomi reached into her pocket again and pulled out a second item, a compact black device the size of a pen. She pressed it once. A soft green light blinked. Real-time audio stream. Her security division in Charlotte was now receiving everything. She sat back. Let the storm gather. Ma'am, Kara's voice returned, sharper now, louder. I need you to confirm once more that this is your assigned seat. Naomi turned her head. You've seen my boarding pass, my ID, and my payment. That's not what I asked. A rustle of movement in first class. Elliot stood. I've been watching, he said. His voice was quiet, but strong. She's done nothing wrong. You're harassing her. Melinda added, We've all seen it. You're escalating. Kara blinked, surprised by the voices. She turned to Derek. Tell them to sit down. Derek didn't move. Naomi looked Kara in the eye. I've complied with every request, she said. If you have a further issue, I suggest you escalate it to federal personnel. You trying to threaten me? Kara snapped. No, Naomi said. I'm just suggesting you make your next move very carefully. Kara narrowed her eyes. I'm going to count to 10, she said, raising her voice to the entire cabin. If this woman doesn't move, I'm calling security. Across the aisle, phones were already recording. Naomi didn't blink, didn't speak. Kara started counting. 1. Jordan activated a second recording app. 2. Elliot leaned over his seat. Don't do this, he warned Kara. 3, Melinda whispered. It's already gone viral. 4. Naomi glanced at her cracked watch. It had belonged to her mother. The glass caught a glint of overhead light. 5. She pressed her hand lightly over the folded document on the tray. 6. A text pinged on her phone. Confirmation received. 7. Derek looked pale now, sweat behind his collar. 8, Jordan whispered. We should call the marshal. 9, Kara's voice rose. 10, Naomi looked up, eyes sharp as steel. Would you like to repeat that into my camera? Kara stepped forward, fist clenched. And then the slap landed. Hard and fast. Naomi's head rocked slightly. Her lips split at the corner, a bright crimson bloom. Phones flashed. Gasps rippled across the cabin. Naomi's hand lifted to her mouth, touched the blood, then lowered again. She didn't scream. She didn't curse. She smiled. You just made your last mistake, she said softly. Kara Whitmore's hand moved faster than her judgment, and the slap rang out like a pistol shot inside the pressurized cabin. The impact echoed, almost unnatural in its violence. Naomi Ellison's head barely turned from the blow, but her lower lip split cleanly at the corner. A thin line of blood trickled downward, catching the cabin light as it slid toward her chin. The silence that followed was not shock. It was paralysis. 12 first-class passengers sat frozen, their phones already lifted, trembling slightly in the air. The whir of the engines faded beneath the crackle of collective disbelief. Naomi blinked once. The pain was sharp, but she had known worse. What stunned her wasn't the strike itself, but the cold satisfaction radiating from Kara's face, the triumphant curl of her mouth, the squint of someone who thought they'd just restored order to a world that dared to change. No one moved. No one spoke. And then, slowly, Naomi touched her lip with one manicured finger. She inspected the blood on her fingertip, as if it were data, something to be catalogued. She opened the flap of her leather briefcase and removed a single square of cloth. Dark navy, soft, monogrammed with NE in silver script. She pressed it gently to her mouth. Then, just as calmly, she adjusted the titanium lapel pin on her blazer. Across the aisle, Elliot Garrison lowered his phone, face pale. "Did everyone see that?" he said aloud, voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. "She hit her." Melinda Zhu was already on a call. "No, it just happened. She slapped her. Yes, I'm filming. Yes, it's still recording." In seat 1C, Jordan Reyes finally stood, planting himself between Naomi and Kara. "Don't touch her again," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of someone who had fought too many battles in courtrooms to allow one more to play out unchecked. Kara stepped back, eyes wide, hand still hovering near her waist, as if she wasn't sure what it had just done. She was refusing orders, Kara said, to no one and everyone. She was hostile. You all heard her. She was threatening me. "I heard you," Elliot said sharply. "Every word, and I have it all on video." "She's dangerous," Kara insisted. "People like that always try to twist things." Naomi's eyes lifted at last, and her voice cut through the rising tide like glass slicing silk. "You have absolutely no idea what you've just done." Before Kara could respond, another voice entered the scene. Calm, low, with just the right balance of curiosity and warning. "Step away from the passenger. Now." A tall black man stepped forward from the rear galley, dark suit pressed, federal badge clipped just inside his jacket. His name was Darius Quinn, U.S. Air Marshal, and the moment he appeared, the power in the room shifted. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush. He simply occupied space, with presence. Kara turned to him, relief breaking across her features. "Thank God. She's been aggressive since we took off. She's refusing to comply. I had no choice." "I wasn't talking to you," Quinn said. Kara's mouth opened and closed. "I was talking to you," he continued, turning his full attention toward her. "Step back, immediately." Passengers shifted in their seats. For the first time, Kara's confidence faltered. "But I'm the one who called for help," she said, breath catching. "I was following protocol." Quinn didn't blink. "And I see a passenger with blood on her face and you standing over her with your hand still clenched." Everyone looked, and there it was. Kara's right hand, knuckles tight, the tips of her fingers trembling. It wasn't adrenaline anymore. It was evidence. "Oh my God," Melinda whispered, her hand still shaking. Jordan moved aside to let Quinn approach. Naomi remained seated, the blood darkening now against the cloth at her lip. She said nothing. "Are you injured, ma'am?" Quinn asked, crouching slightly. "I'm fine," Naomi replied, her voice even. "I just want the flight to continue." Quinn nodded once, then turned to Kara. "What's your name?" "Kara Whitmore, senior flight attendant. I have 8 years of—" "You are to place your hands behind your back," he interrupted. "What?" "You are under investigation for assaulting a passenger aboard a federal aircraft, which, if proven, is a felony under United States Code Title 49. Kara's world tilted sideways. "This is a mistake. I was following safety protocols. She wasn't obeying. You don't understand who I am." Quinn raised an eyebrow. "No, I don't. But I know who she is." A pause. "Who?" Kara asked, confused. Naomi finally lifted her gaze to meet Kara's again. "She owns the aircraft," Quinn said. "She owns the company that built it. And she's my boss." Kara stared blankly. "No, that's not... She's not. She's the chief executive officer of Ellison Aerodyne," Quinn said. "And I strongly advise you to stop talking." Kara's lips moved, but no sound came out. Then she snapped, "She's lying! She's making this up! This is all a setup! You people always—" There it was again. "You people." The phrase that always gave it away. Quinn didn't hesitate. He reached for the cuffs. "You're under federal investigation," he repeated as he secured her wrists. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "I didn't do anything wrong," Kara shouted. "I was protecting the airline, protecting the real customers. I was keeping things professional." From 3B, Melinda's voice cut in, thin with fury. "You slapped a passenger for sitting in her assigned seat." Kara's face flushed purple. "Because she doesn't belong here. Look at her." "I am looking at her," Quinn said coldly. "And I see a woman in a $3,000 suit with platinum credentials who hasn't raised her voice once." Kara twisted in the cuffs. "She forged those. It's all fake. The card, the badge, everything. She probably got them through some diversity program." There was a gasp from row 4. An elderly man sat upright, visibly shaking his head. Naomi rose from her seat, slowly. Her lip was swollen now, the dried blood cracking at the edge. She reached for her briefcase, opened it fully, and withdrew a thin tablet. With one tap, the screen lit up. It showed a live feed from 6 interior aircraft cameras, each one silently documenting the events from different angles. "She doesn't have clearance for that feed," Derek Collins muttered from the galley. "She designed the feed," Jordan snapped. "Did you miss that part?" Naomi turned the tablet toward Quinn. "All of it's been streaming live to our security office in Charlotte," she said. 12 people are watching, and a backup is being sent to federal authorities." She turned to Kara, her voice still calm. "You didn't just hit a passenger, Kara. You hit the woman who signs your paychecks." Kara's knees buckled. "You're bluffing," she whispered. "This can't be real." Naomi stepped closer. "I built this aircraft," she said, each word clean and measured. "Every rivet, every line of code in the turbulence detection, every inch of the cabin's interior. That seat you tried to rip from me, I designed it. That surveillance system, my patent. The entire company you work for, my acquisition 5 years ago." Kara stared at her like she was hallucinating. Naomi leaned slightly forward. "You didn't just assault a passenger today," she said. "You assaulted the system that gave you a job in the first place. And now that system is going to hold you accountable." A long silence followed. The passengers were no longer passive observers. They were witnesses. And they knew it. "Ladies and gentlemen," the pilot's voice finally came over the intercom, brittle with tension. "We've begun our descent into Miami International Airport. Flight crew, prepare for arrival." As the cabin lights shifted, Kara Whitmore, cuffed and speechless, was lowered gently into an empty crew seat. She no longer protested. Naomi sat back down in 1A, wiped her lip again, and picked up her tablet. The recording was still running. They say a person's life flashes before their eyes. But for Kara Whitmore, it was her career, her savings, her future, and every mistake she thought she got away with. The SUV doors opened before the aircraft's wheels fully stopped. Agents in black suits, earpieces coiled behind their necks, moved with silent precision. One carried a compact camera. Another had a tablet ready for digital signatures. And in the middle of it all, a woman with short, jet-black hair stepped forward with the kind of posture that made even seasoned law enforcement instinctively make room. She held a leather folder in one hand and a badge in the other. "Agent Carla Mendez," she said calmly, stepping into the aircraft before the boarding door had fully locked into the jet bridge. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. We're responding to a hate-based physical assault reported in real time by Ellison Aerodyne's Internal Compliance Division. The flight crew backed away without a word. Air Marshal Darius Quinn nodded once, and Agent Mendez approached Seat 1C, where Kara Whitmore sat stiffly, wrists still cuffed, mouth pressed into a thin, trembling line. "Ms. Whitmore," Agent Mendez said in a tone stripped of all emotion, "I need to ask if you require medical attention before we proceed." Kara blinked. No." "Very well." Mendez turned to Naomi Ellison. "Dr. Ellison, do you require medical assistance?" Naomi stood, her lips still split, her voice unwavering. "The incident has been medically documented on board. The injury is minor. The evidence is not." Agent Mendez nodded. "Please remain available for a full statement." Passengers were being held in their seats. First class remained silent, but phones were still recording. The moment was no longer private. It belonged to the world. And Naomi knew it. She had planned for it. Kara glanced toward the open aircraft door, saw the line of agents, the cameras, the corporate representatives from Ellison Aerodyne in full black suits holding clipboards. She thought, briefly, about shouting something, about crying injustice, reversing the victimhood, but her throat closed on the words. She had nothing left to spin. "You don't understand," she tried again, as Agent Mendez gently took her elbow. "She set me up. She must have planned this." "We have the full video feed from 6 cabin angles," Mendez replied, not unkindly. "We have digital audio confirmed and time-stamped. We also have your recorded remarks, which include a federal-level slur protected under hate crime statutes." "I was following protocol." "You broke federal law, repeatedly." Kara shrank inward as the agent guided her off the plane. Outside the cabin, Miami International's jet bridge felt colder than air-conditioned steel. The glare of flashing cameras, CNN, MSNBC, local affiliates, hit her like stadium lights. She turned her face instinctively, but there was no hiding from this. "Is it true?" a reporter shouted. "Did you strike the CEO of your airline? Was it racially motivated? Do you think you'll be indicted under the Civil Rights Enforcement Act?" Kara's knees wobbled. The words meant nothing. They might as well have been in a different language. She was no longer the gatekeeper. She was the story. Back in Charlotte, inside a private conference room lined with projection screens and legal binders, 12 members of Skylink Airways' board sat in tense silence. One seat was already empty. The company's CEO, Harold Brennan, had not returned after taking a call from Ellison Aerodyne's general counsel. In front of every executive lay a printed copy of a single-page agenda, stark and brutal in its phrasing. Emergency session, corporate liability review, and termination protocols, case Andati 2021, CR 014. At precisely 4:00 p.m., the largest screen flickered to life, revealing Naomi Ellison seated at a conference table, her lip bandaged, her posture crisp. Beside her was her chief legal officer, Patricia Blackwood, whose face could have been carved from ice. "Ladies and gentlemen," Naomi began, "let me explain exactly how thoroughly compromised your entire executive structure now is." One board member coughed. "This isn't about a rogue employee," she continued. "It's about a cultural rot you enabled and concealed. Kara Whitmore had 3 prior discrimination complaints, all settled quietly, all sealed, and all reported directly to your offices." Robert Clancy, the CFO, tried to speak. "We followed legal counsel. We were advised—" Naomi cut him off. "You were advised that payouts were cheaper than reforms. You chose silence over accountability. You chose liability over dignity. and now you've chosen me." She tapped the table once. The projection behind her changed. It displayed 3 complaint files, each one with dates, locations, and payout amounts. $45,000, $67,000, $89,000. Beneath them, a single line of red text. Systematic pattern of protected class abuse, federally actionable. "You may be interested to know," Patricia added, her voice cool and crisp, "that the Department of Justice has already received a copy of these files, along with internal memos obtained through whistleblower documentation. Your internal communications, saved Slack logs, even meeting notes." The room sat frozen. "I'm offering you 2 choices," Naomi continued. The screen shifted again, revealing 2 contracts. Option 1, immediate resignation of your CEO and senior leadership. Full restructuring under a federal compliance monitor. $100 million set aside for a passenger reparation and safety fund. All staff retrained under revised bias protocols. And you, personally, donate $5 million each to civil rights nonprofits. "And if we refuse?" one executive asked, barely audibly. Naomi's eyes never wavered. "Then I terminate Ellison Aerodyne's $847 million contract with Skylink Airways. We release all documentation publicly. We trigger shareholder litigation and initiate a Department of Justice civil rights investigation." "You wouldn't survive the public blowback either," someone muttered. "I would," Naomi said, standing now, "because I've already built my legacy. Yours is crumbling in real time." Silence. Not a single protest. Just the sound of crumbling self-delusion. At the Federal Holding Center in Miami, Kara was placed in a sterile room with a metal bench and fluorescent lighting. Agent Mendez sat across from her, flanked by 2 assistants. "We're documenting your statement for initial processing," Mendez said. "Everything will be recorded and subject to judicial review." Kara didn't respond. Mendez activated the tablet. A slow-motion replay of the slap began. The angle was clean. Naomi's head recoiling. The blood. The expression on Kara's face, something between satisfaction and contempt. "This," Mendez said, "is what you're going to be famous for." Kara blinked. It was just 30 seconds. 30 seconds of physical assault, hate-motivated language, abuse of authority, and evidence of a workplace culture that protected you. Mendez slid a file across the table. "You're looking at 8 to 12 years in prison." Kara's breath caught. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply stared at the screen as the video looped again. In her silence, the system began to shift. Outside that room, executives were resigning. Investors were panicking. Compliance officers were being fired. And across America, news anchors were saying one name over and over again. Not Kara Whitmore's, but Naomi Ellison's. The woman who didn't raise her voice, who didn't stand up, who sat in silence and let justice walk to her. 6 months later, the scar on Naomi's lip had faded. But the systems she built in its place were irreversible. It was a Tuesday morning in Washington, D.C., and the National Aviation Safety Conference had never felt more like a battleground. Inside the Marriott Marquis Ballroom, 3,000 professionals sat shoulder to shoulder: pilots, airline executives, federal regulators, union representatives, and silent victims. The air was sharp with anticipation and tension. Beneath the crystal chandeliers and soundproofed walls, decades of unchecked prejudice were about to meet their reckoning. Naomi Ellison stood at the podium, dressed in navy and pearl, her frame tall and composed. A single thin scar ran along the corner of her lower lip. A souvenir, a reminder, a brand she'd chosen to keep. It had healed into something dignified, something permanent. She cleared her throat, waited for the room to quiet fully, and then began. 6 months ago, she said, I was slapped by a flight attendant who believed I didn't belong in the seat I designed. Today, I stand before you not as a victim, but as an architect of change. A ripple passed through the room. Dozens of pens stilled. Typing paused. Naomi scanned the audience. She knew who was there. Heads of compliance, union lobbyists, the newly appointed board from Skylink, including the woman she had handpicked to replace the old regime, Dr. Liana Brooks, an aerospace engineer with a background in ethics and operations reform. But there were others, too. A young black woman from Baltimore, sitting in the third row, hands clutched around a notebook. A pair of elderly Asian brothers, retired pilots from Seattle, nodding in silent agreement. Maria Rodriguez, a veteran-turned-airline safety inspector, seated near the center aisle, tears already beginning to gather. This industry, Naomi continued, has protected its image at the cost of its passengers' dignity. We taught staff how to pour champagne, but not how to see the humanity in the people they served. She let the sentence land. The fallout from that one slap had been monumental. Federal indictments, CEO resignations, Department of Justice investigations. Naomi's Ellison standards had become the new normal. Artificial intelligence bias detection during boarding and in-flight interactions, anonymous complaint channels with real-time monitoring, mandatory training programs developed in partnership with civil rights experts. The result? Over 15,000 potential incidents de-escalated or prevented before reaching violence. Behind Naomi, a large screen displayed live testimonials. Passengers, once mistreated, now recounting changed experiences. Marcus Washington, a software engineer. I used to be terrified to fly. Now they greet me like I belong. Elderly grandmother Susan Jones. They see me. They really see me now. This isn't just about aviation, Naomi said, her voice growing firmer. It's about every space in America where someone has to explain why they exist there. Applause stirred. She held up her hand. We are not done. Backstage, her assistant handed her a tablet. The next presentation would begin shortly, featuring new data on passenger satisfaction, injury reduction, and employee retention since implementing the reforms. The numbers spoke for themselves. Customer trust up by 42%, employee complaints down by 60%, and lawsuits, formerly hidden, down to a fraction of their historic rate. But today wasn't about numbers. Today was about narrative. In Miami, just hours earlier, Kara Whitmore stood in a federal courtroom, her orange jumpsuit stark against the polished wood. Her posture was nothing like before. She was smaller, folded inward. Judge Franklin Hayes, a towering black man with silver in his temples, presided with quiet fury. His voice, though even, filled every inch of the chamber. Ms. Whitmore, he said, in 30 seconds, you committed 7 separate federal violations aboard an aircraft operating under government contract. But what is more concerning to this court is not the duration of your crime. It's the depth of your intent. Kara did not respond. Her public defender sat motionless beside her. You assaulted a woman you believed did not belong, Hayes continued. Not because she was disruptive, not because she failed to follow protocol, but because you did not believe someone like her could occupy a space of power. Silence. Your actions exposed a network of cover-ups, systemic failures, and a corporate culture that rewarded prejudice with silence. That silence ends today. Naomi sat in the courtroom gallery. She did not speak. She did not glare. Her eyes remained on the judge, even as Kara finally looked back at her for the first time. "I hereby sentence you," Hayes declared, "to 8 years in federal prison, 5 years supervised release, and a financial restitution of $23 million payable to Dr. Naomi Ellison." Gasps echoed. Kara's knees gave slightly, but the judge wasn't done. "This court further orders that all major airlines submit to quarterly audits by an independent oversight body, because as of this ruling, this is no longer a private embarrassment. It is a national concern." Reporters exploded into motion. Naomi remained seated, expression unreadable. Later that evening, Naomi stood on the observation deck of Ellison Aerodyne's headquarters. Below her, the Charlotte skyline shimmered. A soft breeze passed. Her scar tingled faintly in the cool air. She turned to the newly confirmed CEO of Skylink, Dr. Liana Brooks, who stood beside her. "Do you believe they'll stick to the standards?" Liana asked. "They'll have no choice," Naomi replied. "You make dignity the price of doing business, and suddenly everyone finds a way to afford it." In the distance, she could hear the rumble of jets, her jets, taking off under the dusk. She thought of her grandfather again, the patch on his Tuskegee flight jacket, the way he used to stare out at the sky like it was both battlefield and home. He had taught her how to fly, not just with wings, but with will. "The next phase begins tomorrow," Naomi said. Liana nodded. Naomi reached into her coat pocket and removed the cracked watch, her mother's. Still broken, still sacred. "We keep this," she whispered, "until the world understands what it costs to stay silent." The glass face caught the city light, casting a small gleam over the ledge. The work wasn't over. Not yet. But it had begun. Day 365, the anniversary of the stupidest 30 seconds of my life. The words formed crookedly under Kara Whitmore's hand, written in a stubby, county-issued pencil onto yellowed paper in a spiral-bound journal. Her handwriting was shaky, worse than it used to be, but not because of the pencil. It was because she still didn't know how to name what she felt. Shame was too easy. Bitterness was too slippery. Guilt, maybe, but even guilt implied she had fully accepted what she had done, what it meant. Inmates in her unit had their own languages, their own codes. They called her Jetgate. Others used less kind names, but most had long stopped talking to her. Her arrogance had isolated her in the first 6 months. Her denial did the rest. Now she had nothing but time. "I keep thinking about her face after I hit her," she wrote slowly. She wasn't angry. She was sad. Like she'd expected it. Like she'd seen it coming her whole life. The prison counselor, Dr. Janet Williams, had called it a quiet devastation. A reaction that disarmed abusers more than screaming ever could. The way Naomi Ellison had sat still, bleeding but composed, had unraveled Kara in ways she couldn't articulate even now. She rubbed the scar on her knuckle, a remnant from the slap. It was still there, barely visible but forever embedded in her skin. A reminder of what 30 seconds had cost. Outside the cell block, in a world that had long moved on, the systems Naomi Ellison created were reshaping everything. At Denver International Airport, Flight 447 prepared to board. A soft chime sounded over the terminal speakers as passengers filed toward Gate C-16. The agent smiled at each traveler, but her eyes flicked periodically to the small screen beside her podium, a live dashboard fed by Ellison Aerodyne's bias detection AI. So far, nothing had triggered an alert. She handed back a boarding pass to Marcus Washington, a black software engineer in seat 2A. He looked momentarily surprised by her smile. Not forced, not dismissive, just warm. "Enjoy your flight," she said sincerely. He blinked. "Thanks." He walked away slowly, not realizing he was smiling back until he reached the jet bridge. In row 4, Maria Rodriguez helped her 8-year-old daughter buckle in. The child asked why her mother had tears in her eyes. "Because flying used to be scary for people who look like us, mi hija," she whispered. "But not anymore." Meanwhile, in a small recording studio in Charlotte, Naomi Ellison prepared for her final interview of the anniversary week. The room was softly lit, soundproofed, warm. The walls were lined with acoustic foam, and a single chair sat in the center facing the camera. Naomi stepped into frame wearing a simple black dress, a silver pin at her collar. Ellison Aerodyne's insignia, redesigned after the incident to include a single horizontal scar beneath the wing. The interviewer, an older white journalist from 60 Minutes, adjusted her notes, clearly nervous. "You ready?" she asked. Naomi nodded. They began. "What made you speak out the way you did, Dr. Ellison?" Naomi paused for a moment, then said, "I didn't. At first, I waited. I waited for her to realize what she had done, to take it back. She never did." The journalist nodded. "You stayed silent after the slap." "I wanted the silence to speak louder than any lawsuit," Naomi said. "I wanted the world to hear it, to watch it, to feel what happens when someone in power finally miscalculates." The screen behind her lit up with footage from airports, hotels, retail stores, all now outfitted with Ellison standard monitoring systems. The footage rolled. Agents stopping to assist elderly Hispanic travelers, a white flight attendant respectfully checking a boarding pass without interrogation, a gate agent intervening gently when a colleague began to show unconscious bias. What would you say to people who still think this is about race? Naomi's voice didn't flinch. "I'd say it always was." Later that night, she returned to her home office. The lights of Charlotte flickered gently outside her windows. The city had changed too. More visible equity in its corporate offices, more outreach in its chambers of commerce. Small changes, but visible. She pulled out a folder, her grandfather's discharge papers from World War II. Dishonored, once, for refusing to shine another pilot's boots. She placed the papers beside her cracked watch. Together, they told the story of how dignity, once denied, had been reclaimed across generations. A notification blinked on her tablet. Publishers Weekly. The Sound of Change remains #1 for the 6th consecutive month, but the letters mattered more. Naomi opened the latest one. "Dr. Ellison, I'm a 67-year-old black woman who stopped flying after being humiliated in 1987. I read your story. I bought a plane ticket for the first time in 35 years. My son asked me why I was afraid to travel. After reading your book, I realized I didn't have a good answer anymore. We're taking our first family vacation next month." Naomi held the paper in both hands and closed her eyes. That, more than the lawsuits, more than the compliance reports, more than the resignation letters, was the reward. Somewhere in the distance, the low drone of a plane passed overhead. She looked up through the glass. Outside, under the cover of night, the very systems she helped build were humming along, keeping passengers safe, holding employees accountable, documenting instead of dismissing. Back in her cell, Kara stared at the last line she had written. I thought I was protecting the airline, protecting real customers. But now I know. I was the one who didn't belong. 7 years left to think about that trade. There are stories we hear, and there are stories we feel. Naomi Ellison's story, her dignity, her scar, her silence, and her strength, was not just felt, it reverberated. It began not with a speech or a lawsuit or a campaign. It began with humiliation. A slap. 30 seconds of prejudice disguised as authority. The kind of moment older Americans know all too well, too. The moment when you're told you don't belong without words, and the moment you choose whether to disappear or stand. Naomi stood, quietly, and the world changed. For many, that flight was just a Tuesday. But for Naomi, it was the culmination of years of earned silence, of years designing systems from the inside, of being brilliant, unacknowledged. Until one person, one woman, too certain of her superiority, struck a match against a mountain of dry injustice. Kara Whitmore didn't just strike Naomi. She struck the nerves of every Black professional told to be grateful just to be present. She struck the memory of every elder denied dignity in the name of protocol. And in her arrogance, she revealed what most systems try to hide, that bias, when normalized, becomes cruelty with a uniform. Naomi did not rage. She did not plead. She did not shout. She revealed. Through strategy, evidence, and stillness, Naomi exposed a system designed to reward silence and punish truth. She did not just seek justice for herself. She initiated structural accountability for millions. She reminded this country that policy without empathy is just paper, that dignity cannot be granted by position, it must be upheld by character. In the days after, she refused to be called a hero. She refused to make it about herself. Instead, she rewrote the rules. She turned her silence into a new standard, one that now lives in airports, in employee handbooks, in courtrooms. She built mechanisms that made prejudice visible, documentable, actionable. She created spaces where victims are no longer ignored. She redefined what it means to belong. Naomi's journey resonates deeply with those who have endured quiet violations, those microaggressions that never made the news, but etched themselves into memory. She reminded us that the most powerful resistance is often the refusal to be reduced. What was striking is not just what Naomi said, but what she didn't need to say. The courtroom heard her voice once. The boardroom heard her conditions. But the most powerful statement was in the restraint she showed when the world expected fury. Her philosophy remains. This scar came from silence. I'll wear it until silence is no longer the price of survival. That scar now appears on the insignia of a new generation of justice-minded institutions, not as a wound, but as a badge. And Kara? She remains a cautionary tale, not because of her punishment, but because of her choices. She thought she was defending order. She was preserving exclusion. She thought she was protecting her company. She was betraying its future. And now she spends her days writing letters no one reads, tracing the edges of a scar that will never carry dignity. But this is not Kara's story. This is the story of a woman who refused to shrink, of a woman who carried not just her name, but the memory of those who came before, of grandfathers in segregated squadrons, of mothers told to wait in the back, of communities who knew what it meant to survive institutions not built for them. It is the story of what happens when one person chooses principle over performance, when they reject hush money and demand policy, when they say, "Not again, not this time." And it is the story of those who stood beside her, witnesses who filmed, passengers who refused to stay silent, employees who came forward, allies who chose courage over convenience, because it takes all of them. The survivor, the witness, the one who dares to speak up. This is a story for every grandparent who remembers separate drinking fountains, for every father who teaches his daughter how to de-escalate racism before teaching her how to drive, for every citizen who's ever been told, "You must be mistaken." You weren't. What Naomi built cannot be unbuilt. What she revealed cannot be unseen. And what she demanded, justice with dignity, is no longer a favor. It is a standard. So the next time injustice appears in front of you, not with a slap, but with a smirk, a delay, a dismissal, remember Naomi. Remember her scar. Remember her silence. And remember that silence, when chosen, can be power. But when imposed, it ends here. If this story moved you, if you believe silence should never be the price of belonging, then leave us a #1 in the comments. And subscribe to our channel to witness the next story of quiet resistance, true justice, and human dignity reclaimed